I quote somebody and they die. Tina Tambor says it might be the beginning of the end, or possibly the end of the beginning. And SCOTUS says enough already on this week's Unnamed Real Estate Podcast. Well, it's July 1st. My name is Charles Dawson, Charles Ray Dawson. I'm an associate broker with ProStar Realty. And this is my Unnamed Real Estate Podcast. And I killed a man this week. Not really, but, Donald Rumsfeld shuffled off his mortal coil and has gone into the great known unknown. I got the news on that one yesterday, and I thought it was really weird that this is a guy I probably haven't thought about in a decade. And then, he quoted one of his lines in last week's podcast, and next thing you know, he's back in the news as no longer being news. So, sorry to see him go. Hate it when anybody passes on. A couple things going on this week. Now, Tina Tambor had her meeting on Monday. We're going to be missing next week for the holiday and stuff like that. She's not going to be doing a show on the 5th, so we're going to have to watch her again on the 12th. And she called out some really interesting things. Most of it is, the big question is, are we at the end of the beginning, or are we at the beginning of the end? Which is a Churchill quote for the people who are historians in the audience, because the numbers are starting to turn around. As we see when we do the weekly numbers at the end of this thing, you will see that once again we're going up in active properties, and we are starting to see a really distinct trend line in certain cities of the amount of buyers coming down at the same time the amount of active properties are coming up, and we're going to actually start hitting that alpha where we have the same amount. We start returning to what's called a normal market. Some cities this is happening a lot faster than others. Some cities are going to still take a very long time. So I did a little bit more research this morning, and we are still in the MLS system. Remember, this is statewide, mostly Maricopa, because the other counties do have their some of the other counties have their own MLS systems, but we do branch out and hit those areas sometime. That the index is still looking at, we got 107 buyers for 25 and a half houses out there. And this is projected to continue, but it's the regionality. It's the very specific. Some cities are recovering faster than others. We're seeing Tempe starting to recover faster. We're seeing Peoria, demand in Peoria is starting to drop. Demand in Glendale. Phoenix is showing a reduction in demand, but the problem with Phoenix is because it's bigger and has more different types of housings. And I'm talking, you got big fancy, anthem houses and stuff like that. You got the stuff going on down there in the Willow District, right? And then you got stuff going on in Maryvale and over in the Slope. Phoenix is not the best way to track it because you do have those different types of properties, different types of buyers going on. But we are starting to see everything is starting to converge. And I told you a couple months ago that I told you there wasn't going to be a crash, and I still don't think there's going to be a crash, but I told you when we start seeing it come out of a seller's market into a buyer's market, we will know that 6 months in advance, and we'll start screaming, it's starting to end. Last one out of the pool, turn off the lights. And we're pretty much at this. So I'm not screaming just yet. I'm speaking firmly and with authority. We're definitely in the middle of something. So we're going to keep tracking these things. I'm going to start coming up with a way to start tracking the individual city areas more precisely. Unfortunately, the way they do run their numbers and stuff like that, and because of the way zip codes are set up, we can't track it by zip code, which would be awesome. But there's some zip codes that just do not have enough residential housing in them to start actually being able to get a trend line. So just remember, these are not predictions. These are what are called projections. All right. We're looking at the curve. We're looking at the direction. We dot it out and we say, bam, right about there. October. That's when we start crossing over. And of course, anything can happen between now and then. We might get another interest rate spike. And if the interest rates was a spike, that would reduce demand, which means inventory will come up even more. There's always those issues out there that might affect this. But we're starting to see this starting to happen. So here it comes, guys. We did have a solid month of gain in June, as you'll see by the numbers. And if you've been paying attention towards the end of it, where I do run the numbers, June is our first month since I started tracking where week to week, we went up in active listings every week. Back in May, we had like 1 week in there where we dropped down 100, and a couple other months back in March. But this is our first month. We had more houses come Wednesday than we had the Wednesday before. So, and some of that is because of loss of demand. We're seeing less buyers out there. Remember that 107 buyers I used to talk about, or just talked about, that used to be 112. Right, that used to be 115 on some weeks. So it is starting to come down. Less people are getting interested. We still have as many as we normally have. We still have slightly above as many as we normally have, and we're still being affected mostly by the inventory. All right, there's not as many houses out there that we should normally have, although people are starting to list. Don't know where these people are all going. Maybe they're just deciding to transfer out of state. I know of at least 2 different couples who are moving out of state. All right, so that's good because their houses are going to go on the market. So the other little bit of news that came out, this is definitely going to have effect one way or the other, is Supreme Court of the United States last night, or was it the night before? Anyways, they made the announcement that enough is enough, and they have found it unconstitutional that the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, could mandate to landlords that they could not evict people during the pandemic. Supreme Court ruled 5-4 and said this is not a thing and you guys can't do that, although one justice, and I believe it was Kavanaugh, in fact, give me just a second, I'll tell you exactly who it was. Yeah, it was Kavanaugh. Kavanaugh decided to flip at that point and join the dissenters in the first part and say, but we're still going to run it out through July 31st. Because if you've been paying attention to the news, and I think we covered this last week, the CDC was, we were going to have the eviction forbearance pushed off another month. It was supposed to end yesterday on June 30th. They pushed it out another month and said, oh no, we're going to give you till July 31st. Another Supremes just came in and said, no, you're not doing that anymore. And then Kavanaugh jumped over to the other side, joined the 4 justices who thought it was okay for the CDC to do that, and agreed with them to let the CDC's time period end as they've already projected out. So July 31st is when landlords are going to be able to start eviction processes on people who are not, for whatever reason, paying their rent, or they're having reasons to evict them. So evictions are going to start coming back into play. Tina does not see this as having much of an impact. I also don't see myself having this having a lot of impact, because you're not going to see people who are suddenly getting evicted suddenly getting a loan and going out there to buy a house. Right? If their lack of payments have been reported on credit, and usually rents are one of the last things people start missing payments on. If it makes any sense, they will start missing credit card payments first. They'll start missing car payments. Rent is usually one of the last things to go. And if there is anybody out there who, had such a loss of income that they couldn't make their rent payments, the odds are they've made they did not make other payments, and that's affected their credit score. So they're not going to be moving into the buyer side of the equation, as we see going on. We might see landlords start taking these, once they get these rental properties back, they might decide, okay, I don't want to be a landlord anymore, and turn around and decide to sell those properties. So we might see a little jump up in that. But looking at the appreciation and value that they've probably had on their house over the last year, they're trying to rent out, and the increase in rents, they might just be in a better position to just say, okay, let's try to rent this thing first. And they'll probably get those things filled up. So it will be a really good time for you to be looking into getting a rental property, say in August and September, when those evictions start freeing up those properties and the landlords have time to go in there and get those turned around and ready for rent. So, and pretty much just in time for college students to start showing up. So, and then we start going into the seasonal snowbirds again. So it's actually seems to be relatively good timing on that. So don't expect that to have that much of an impact on the buy-sell side of the house. So if you're still looking to buy, if you're still looking to sell, I don't think that's going to be much of an impact. Forbearances also came up in the conversation. And remember, a forbearance is where it's not the rent you haven't been making, it's your mortgage you haven't been paying. Making a payment on. And I can't see anywhere in any of the news where how this SCOTUS decision has anything to do with forbearances, because that was not run by the CDC. That was actually run through the financial organizations, and they were doing it with the leverage on they were doing that with the leverage that the loans that the owners of the property took out were government secured, and that's the reason why lending companies couldn't start the foreclosure process on those individuals. But I could see how a savvy lawyer could just take that and roll with it. And if these lending companies have savvy lawyers on tap, and I assume they do, I can see them starting to use that as the argument as why we can start getting rid of the forbearances, and they can start foreclosure proceedings on that. Although they'd probably still try to go to various things of working it out with the borrower, working out with the, tacking the amount owed onto the end, restructuring the loan, maybe changing the payments, anything like that. So might have more inventory coming in. Don't really expect it at this point. I think the forbearance boogie monster is pretty much dead. So those are the three things I wanted to talk to you about. The SCOTUS thing, the end of the beginning. Talked about Donald Rumsfeld. We're going to finish this up with the numbers and everything. Thank you very much for listening. I'll leave your comments below and whatnot, especially if you have a question about the turnaround in a specific city. I can still look it up by a specific city. So if you want to have a conversation, let's say you're living in Peoria or something, when are we projecting out that will suddenly start flipping over to buyer's market? Leave it down in the show notes below, and I'll try to answer your questions. Thank you very much. Have a great week. And now the numbers for June 30th, 2021. Our actives this week are 5,581, which is up 144 from the week before. Our under contracts looking for backups are 1,252, which is up 133. Our pendings this week are 1,925 new pendings, which is up just 8 from the week before. And our contracts that have buyer's contingencies on them are at 88, which is up 4 from the week before. And our closings are at 2,382, which is up 134 as we go into the end of the month.